sure there are a million people we'd both rather be with right now.
Couple thousand at most.
In the moment we're lost and found, I just wanna be by your side.
Do you think it'll hurt?
I don't know.
It's not often that you see a ship as perfect as Bonnie and Damon's be met with so much controversy. I mean, for a show that literally goes out of its way to tell you that you can have multiple epic loves, even the writers seemed hell-bent on denying any possibility of that for Damon or Bonnie. However, the actors, who are confirmed Bamon stans, slipped in as much romantic subtext into the show as possible, which I've and many other Bamon diehards have always appreciated them for. Most people credit Elena or Stefan when it comes to Damon's character development, but I disagree. I think most, if not all, credit should go to Bonnie. I mean, Damon did say it himself here.
And you're gonna help make me the best man I can possibly be.
But what exactly makes this ship so shippable, even after the show's reign has been long over? Off the bat, we have two people thrown together with a common interest to protect Elena. Damon is a vampire and Bonnie a witch. In TVD, when vampires are around, you can expect them to bring destruction and chaos wherever they land, while witches represent balance and the natural order of things. Not to mention, most witches have a strict no vampires allowed policy when dealing in magic. Damon and Bonnie are complete opposites on the surface, and yet throughout the first couple seasons we have multiple instances where Damon and Bonnie are forced to work together and they surprisingly make a great team. And I'm sure we've all heard that saying, opposites attract, but why do we say that? Well, my personal belief is that the reason these opposites in particular attract is because they're not really opposites at all. In fact, for most ships that fit into this trope, it's usually only their outward personas that are opposites, but their goals and values are perfect symmetry, and the same logic can be applied to Bamon. When we first meet Damon, he is selfish and cataclysmic. The audience is meant to view him as the complete antithesis to Stefan's selfless nature. But in actuality, most, if not all, of Damon's decisions are motivated by love, brotherhood, or friendship. Let's think back to season 1. Where Damon was our mysterious vampire antagonist, and the conflict of the season was Damon's master plan to get the love of his life out of an ancient tomb buried under Mystic Falls. His motivation here is love. However, his plan is immediately presented as being bad because it directly conflicted with the wants of our main protagonists, Stefan and Elena. And though his methods of going about enacting this plan were reckless and involved unnecessary bloodshed, we can't discredit the fact that he was attempting to save the girl he loved from an eternity of suffering. Damon was willing to risk it all to save Catherine, and as controversial as this take may be, I think that's pretty selfless.
Damon, we need to get out of here.
Doesn't make sense, they locked her inside.
If we don't leave now, we're not getting out.
How could she not be in here?
It's not worth spending all of eternity down here. She's not worth it.
Now, Damon commits some pretty heinous acts in this lengthy supernatural drama, but I do think that the majority of the plotline surrounding Damon, where we're supposed to think he's acting out of his own gain, are actually just his cocky attitude and or trauma response getting in the way. And this leads me into Bonnie. Starting in season 1, it's shown that Bonnie is wickedly intimidated by the supernatural world. We see it in how she interacts with her quickly turning vampire and werewolf friends, and we see it in how she approaches being a witch and using magic. She's constantly taking breaks, asking for guidance, and doubting her powers.
Did I do this?
I think so, yeah.
Nobody else saw, did they? No. Don't tell anybody. Please.
But when it comes time to defeat great evils and take out creatures that risk her friend's safety, she puts it all out on the line for them, regardless of risk. Like Damon, she is motivated by love, family, and friendship. Hopefully you see where I'm going here. In the episode Isabel, Bonnie saves Damon and Stefan Salvatore from being burned and killed by the founding family members. Though it was originally her doing that brought them this close to demise, Bonnie decided against her hatred and instead sided with her humanity. Before this moment, it's very unlikely that Damon would have been saved by a witch without threatening or manipulating her to do his bidding first. So for Bonnie to have saved him from death, after knowing the things he's done to cause her and her town pain, was something he was incredibly grateful for. Especially as this is something that Damon has never experienced while being in the supernatural world. Someone who owes him nothing, showing him true morality and kindness. Time and time again, Damon witnessed Bonnie's selflessness. He witnessed her not only take on vampires beyond her years, but do it to protect someone like him. Seeing these patterns over and over softens him and begins to shift his perspective, even though he's unaware that it's happening at the time. And that's one of the many things that I love about the Bamon dynamic. We get to see Damon making up petty nicknames for Bonnie like Bonnie the Teenage Witch or Bon Bon, and yes, they bicker and tend to be more sarcastic with one another than kind, but Bonnie changed Damon in a way that neither Stefan nor Elena could. She changed Damon simply by being herself around him.
She had hope for both of us. She's the reason I survived. The reason I made it out. Who knew? Turns out you spend time with someone and don't kill them, you actually become friends. I'm doing this for Bonnie, Elena. Not for you.
Bonnie's innate selflessness reminded Damon that a standard can be raised even when you're surrounded by darkness. It reminded him that there are people in this world that care to be good. And most importantly, she reminded him of his humanity.
Good.
You can't tell her.
Secret's safe with me, but I mean, with all that power, is there no way to increase your odds?
Careful, Damon. I might start to think you actually care.
We wouldn't want that.
And as Bonnie unknowingly served as his reminder of humanity, she also served as what he could possibly lose if he forgot that humanity, which is what he feared the most. Damon hated the idea of being alone, or more specifically, being given up on. And I'm just going to say this now, unpopular as it may be, but I don't think Damon truly feared losing his brother or Elena. And this doesn't mean I think he didn't care about them. I think he cared a lot about them, but he wasn't afraid of losing them the way he was of Bonnie. Stefan and Elena compromised their morals a lot to be there for Damon. And sure, when Damon messed up, they might have gone mad in the moment, but they were just as attached to Damon's destruction as he was to their enablism. It's why, after decades of going back and forth, Stefan was never able to truly release himself from his brother's tether. Not to mention the tumultuous relationship between Damon and Elena always leading back into how they just can't leave each other alone. Damon was not only someone these two people loved, they were hooked to his madness, like an addict to a drug. But that wasn't Bonnie. And Damon knew that. Bonnie saw the worst of Damon before she saw the good. She saw him manipulate and kill and use people, including herself. But even after all that, she saw the good, and she pursued it. And I think that's when Damon realized he couldn't lose someone like her. Because if he did, who would give him the courage to be good? You see, Damon wasn't always a bad guy. We get small glimpses into his life as a human where others would characterize him as a man who wanted to make his family proud, dedicated to his brother's well-being. He was a hopeless romantic, and he mostly went about life seeing the best in people. But it's not like Damon was some naive lost puppy dog. From young, Damon was very aware of the different qualities of the people he was surrounded by. His father's abusive nature did not evade him, and it's why when he and Stefan were children, Damon shielded him from the punishments and took them for himself.
Grooming you to be proper young men of society. Do you really want to put her through the heartache of thinking she is a complete and utter failure?
No.
Then what would a man do?
He would tell the truth.
And the truth is?
I took it.
I didn't raise you to be a thief. But I also didn't raise you to be a liar, and you have told the truth here today. Have you learned your lesson? This is to make certain you remember it.
The same goes for his relationship with Catherine. Damon knew Catherine was a monster, but he also saw the relationship she formed with the other vampires and even her handmaiden. Though Catherine was selfish and conniving and manipulative, he witnessed her care and he still chose to see the good in her and hold on to that belief, no matter how delusional that belief had become to others. But things took a turn for the worse the night Damon and Stefan were unalived and transitioned into vampires. For one, Damon had entrusted Stefan to not give any hints to their father about Catherine being a vampire.
Not if we talked to him, explained how we feel. He could help us keep her safe.
You going mad? No, Father would drive a stake in her himself.
That's not true. We can trust
No,
him.
not with this. No, please, promise me you won't tell him, Stefan.
And Stefan, who was much more naive then, accidentally outed her, causing her to be taken away, which then resulted in the two becoming vampires themselves, and Damon watched as his brother's thirst for blood take over his sensibilities and caused him to eat their own father. We can establish a few things from Damon's backstory that caused him to become the Damon we know in TVD. 1. Stefan's betrayal of Damon's trust and then immediate descent into bloodthirsty madness shaped how Damon viewed vampirism, which was through a destructive lens. 2. Damon's attempt to do everything correctly as a human and still become his father's disappointment before his demise limited the standard Damon held for himself. He was a people's pleaser as a human, and that seemingly got him nowhere, so as a vampire, he'd want to change.
You and me for all eternity. But hear this, brother. I will make it an eternity of misery for you.
Damon.
And 3. Catherine, who at this point was the only person Damon felt he'd ever belonged with, now being dead, meant that he officially had no solid tie to his humanity, or to the life he once lived.
Catherine's dead, Steph. There's no world without her.
No, you can turn that off too.
So he threw it all away and embraced the monster. But as I've mentioned previously, Damon still struggled with his morals throughout the entirety of the show, and while he struggled, there were multiple times where he'd spiral or self-sabotage to keep himself from being held to too high of expectations, fearing that he wasn't good enough to reach them due to his past mistakes and loss of humanity. As each year ticked by and Damon grew more comfortable and confident with vampirism, he lost himself in the process, hence the self-sabotaging behaviors and the hot and cold personality switch that he carried on him like a shield. Elena, who by this time was in love with Damon, tried to keep Damon in line, but in the situations where she chose her well-being over his, you could always expect him to lash out in the worst ways, which didn't help with making him a better man. Despite the struggle, as Damon and Bonnie grew closer, I think Bonnie effortlessly combated this switch of his with her innate selflessness. And as you've probably noticed, I've used the word selfless a lot in this video, because multiple characters have the quality of selflessness. But Bonnie's was different because it wasn't something she had to try at, it came naturally to her. Stefan was selfless out of guilt for being a Ripper, and Elena, though not guilty, was selfless out of trauma and losing almost everyone she's ever loved. Guilt and trauma were the two things Damon had the hardest times letting go and healing from, and that's exactly why neither Stefan nor Elena could truly help Damon succeed in being better. Which is also why Bonnie fits in perfectly, not as an enabler or a reminder of Damon's demons, but as a key to liberation from them. Now, I've talked a whole bunch about Damon and his hardships, and I don't want this video to seem like the ship only holds value because it makes Damon a better man, since that's definitely not the only reason why I love them so much. While Bonnie was Damon's moral compass and key to free himself from a destructive perspective, Damon was Bonnie's fiercest protector and the person she gained comfort from. If you've watched TVD, you probably know one of the most beloved seasons is Season 6, which I've coined the Bamon season, because we get so many lovable moments between these two characters. Including, but not limited to, Damon being protective of Bonnie and Kai's presence.
Damon.
Sorry it doesn't work for me.
Hey, we might be having a bit of a disagreement, but don't ever lay a hand on her.
Kind of a non-issue now. Missed today's eclipse. Rain check for tomorrow?
No.
Bonnie sending Damon back into the real world.
Get out of here.
I'm not gonna make it. But you are. Modus.
No.
Their banter during this particular phone call.
Glad you called.
Uh-oh. Caroline go off the rails? If so, I called it.
Gloating in one of my best friend's times in need.
It's rare that I miss you.
Bonnie, I thought I was clear. Our relationship only exists within the confines of 1994.
I think one phone call makes us friends.
You don't have to pretend, Bon. I'm like a fever you can't shake.
Yeah, disease.
You okay?
And obviously the iconic reunion hug, because what kind of monster would I be if I didn't include that here?
Bonnie.
One and only.
Oh, you made it.
There's many more moments in this season that would have me smiling ear to ear, but these are the ones that gave me the most buzz. Season 6 is the season where I think Damon realizes just how integral Bonnie is to his life. Remember when I said that Bonnie had already begun shifting Damon's perspective by the end of season 1, even though he was widely unaware? Well, by season 6, Damon is absolutely sure he cannot lose Bonnie, and this confirmation comes in the episode The Black Hole Sun, where Kai reveals the ascendant they all need to escape and why the prison world was created in the first place. But backtracking a bit, before this reveal, Damon had been harboring his secret reasoning for why he kept calling the prison world his own personal hell, and it's because on the day the prison world was set, Damon did something absolutely unforgivable, and when Damon admits this to Bonnie, she doesn't gawk at him with disgust or make him feel worse about himself. Bonnie instead wholly embraces Damon's darkness and chooses to focus on the side of him she's never seen before, his humanity.
So it makes you different than Kai. There's hope for you.
This intimate moment is what eventually leads to Bonnie sacrificing herself to get Damon back into the real world, and Damon does not take this sacrifice lightly.
Optimism.
Bonnie.
You're still alive.
After confirming Bonnie's still alive, Damon does everything in his power to get Bonnie back, even going to the lengths of betraying Alaric, his best friend, to steal the Ascendant for her. And that brings me back to when I said that these two characters are more alike than we think. Out of everyone in TVD, it was Damon that was 100% committed to bringing Bonnie back, no matter what. And with the way Damon acted, you'd think he'd known her for his entire life, or that they'd gone along from the very beginning, but neither of those are true. And yet, there Damon was, being outcast by the people Bonnie had known forever because his methods of getting her back were too extreme. Nobody else in that show would sacrifice themselves the way Damon and Bonnie repeatedly do for each other. And season 6 shows that Damon's bond is solid and raw and something that both characters need. What Bonnie and Damon had was more than friendship. They were soulmates. In Damon, Bonnie found a person who she could count on to always be the extreme in her life and do the extreme to keep her safe. And fast forwarding a bit to season 7, we get tons of evidence of this very thing, including the fact that Damon locked himself away for 3 years because he couldn't bear putting Bonnie in any more danger than their friendship already had. Now, while some fans tried to rewrite this scene and make it seem like Damon locked himself away for Elena and Elena alone, Damon says it here, clear as day, that his reasoning was to protect Bonnie.
But no matter what I say or how hard I try and drill it into your skulls, you're not gonna stop trying. Which is why I have to take myself out of the equation. And all ends tomorrow. You'll never have to worry about me again.
There's comfort in knowing that after all the sacrifices you've made, there's at least one person who would equally sacrifice as much for you. And Damon was that person for Bonnie. The pair balanced each other in a way that no other person could for them, and they will always be my TVD endgame. With all this being said, I don't really have a nice way to wrap this video up. If you're wondering why I neglected to talk about season 7 and 8, it's mostly because I've only watched those seasons 2 times or so, whereas I've watched seasons 1 and 6 about 8 times. I do know that there's a lot of Bamon content in the last 2 seasons, but it's strangely plagued by the mentioning of Elena, which I think was intentional on the writers' parts to make the couple seem as platonic as possible. Either way, if you enjoyed my rambling and also love Bamon or TVD, give this video a like and subscribe for more content coming soon. I'm not going to limit myself to only talking about TVD, but if there's a specific show, relationship, film, or something that you'd like me to cover, leave some requests down in the comments. And for those of you who've known about the making of this video for a while, I truly appreciate your patience and support. Thank you guys!